Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 89 of the AskHistorians podcast. I'm your host this week, Brian Watson, and I'm very excited to be bringing you this very special recording from the National Council of Public Historians from this past April, when 5 members of your dearly loved moderation team of AskHistorians went to present on what AskHistorians was, what we do, and how we build our community from the ground up. You will hear in order a speech from me about what exactly Reddit is and explaining it to the uninitiated. And then you'll hear a speech from David about the history of AskHistorians, so to speak, and it will go into great depths on how and why we developed the rules and procedures that we did. Following that will be a presentation from Will on how we engage people where they are and how we use AskHistorians to teach amateurs and experts. Finally, you will hear a conclusion from Kate, who discusses what democratizing the digital humanities means and what the future of AskHistorians could be. These are followed by a brief question and answer section, and a link to the actual speeches will be included in the show notes. Unfortunately, the quality of this episode is a bit mixed, and it can be at times hard to hear some of the people, as it's recorded quite literally on my cell phone. But we believed it was important to get out there so you guys could see the sort of work you're supporting with the podcast Patreon and with AskHistorians in general. Again, feel free to look at the show notes if you want to read the speeches. With that said, let us begin.
Welcome to the AskHistorians podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I would like to thank the National Council of Public Historians for hosting us. As Hunter noted, my name is Brian Watson. I'm a historian of ethnography and obscenity, and I'm here today as a member of Reddit's AskHistorian community. The purpose of my speech is to explain to the uninitiated what exactly Reddit and AskHistorians are. But almost more importantly, it's my job to contextualize our forum within the larger scope of what it means to be a public historian practicing history in the digital age. So with this information, you'll be able to fully understand the following presentation that are going to drill down deeper into specific topics that deal with AskHistorians. Our case study is AskHistorians. Essentially, this is the sub-forum of a much larger website called Reddit. Founded in 2005, Reddit stylizes itself as the front page of the internet. It's a series of thousands upon thousands of bulletin boards on every possible topic imaginable. If you were to visit the front page today, you would see links from posts to anything about current politics, to scientific breakthrough, sports, television, cute animals. But the difference between Reddit and the curated page, the front page of a curated page like the New York Times or the Washington Post, is that users can upvote posts to the top or downvote them off the front of the page. So thus, it is important to note that a game layer is built into the very bedrock of the forum that we use to build our community. The specific upvote and downvote game layer of the Reddit platform is a strength, I think, in that the content of thousands of subforums, called subreddits, allow the users to hopefully vote the best material to the top and the worst material down. This will hopefully create an interesting mix of what's popular and interesting on the internet in any given time. When a person makes an account with Reddit, which requires no more than a username and a password, they can choose their own subreddits based on their personal interests. For example, a photographer based in San Francisco might choose to subscribe to photography, San Francisco, and the hiking subreddits, whereas a programmer in Boston might subscribe to video games, nerd, and programming subreddits. A registered user can also create their own subreddits with subreddit-specific goals and rules. And what this means is that Reddit sometimes can be like a major city. There are good neighborhoods and bad ones, places you want to go and places you'd rather avoid. But one of the places we hope you will go is AskHistorians. AskHistorians was founded in 2011 by Arthur Wardle, an undergraduate at Utah State University. In doing so, he was inspired by another subreddit called Ask Science. The premise of AskHistorians is that any registered Reddit user can ask any sort of question out of our panel of experts. It's the simplest kind of community one could build, a question and answer session. And for our purposes here, it's great. The bare bones interactions reveal a lot of important things that people might not consider when approaching public history. I can hear 2 challenges to that statement. Any user can ask any question on any topic, and the second is, well, how do you define expert? So let's break it down a little further. Every community, online or off, has rules to regulate behavior, spoken or unspoken. Good rules are foundational to good online communities, and therefore good public outreach. This includes AskHistorians. So we have a very detailed set of rules for both questions and answers, and these rules are strictly enforced by a team of moderators, which includes everybody you see out here today, as well as 30 other moderators. Ask Historians is famous for its moderating style, because we want to ensure both the quality and the civility of the discourse in our subreddit. The strict moderation policy came out of a struggle to create a diverse and inclusive space, which if you've ever seen the comments on YouTube, you know can be a very struggle online. Davey will speak about that a little bit more. But when it comes to asking questions, we have a series of straightforward rules. The first of which is that no questions that concern current events are allowed, which is defined 20 years ago. That rule is to prevent the soapboxing and moralizing that comes with current political events, which can be a little contentious at times. With that, we don't allow questions that are loaded, like why is Nixon the worst American president? Why not Obama? We also prohibit poll-type questions, like these are the questions that use phrases like least, best, worst, most. As I'm sure you all know, it's just about impossible to answer a question of who was the best general in history, or what was the worst thing Americans ever did, despite the fact that many historians and reporters have spent their entire lives trying to do just that. Obviously, a normal outreach project would be more focused. The boundaries of how the community will interact with itself and the organizers will be shaped by what you were trying to achieve and the content you provide. So to provide a few examples of our most popular questions, what did a medieval town smell like? Did early modern Africans have any mythology about the slave trade? Why didn't elves cross the Atlantic with Irish immigrants? Was there anything like the Hunger Games on Easter Island? But to find out the answer to all of those questions, you'll have to visit Ask Historians. So next we come to our rules about answers, which will also answer the question of how we define experts. Any answer in Ask Historians is expected to be comprehensive and informative, in line with historiography and the historical method, and includes sources and citations wherever possible. We tell people to ask themselves 4 questions before they even begin to post on Ask Historians.
That's very rare.
That's terrible here.
I can just tell you though. The 4 questions you need to ask yourself before you write a post and Ask Historians. Do I have the expertise to answer this question? Have I done research on this question? Can I cite my sources? And can I ask follow-up questions? Furthermore, any answer that depends on unfounded speculation is removed, as are answers that are purely anecdotal, moralizing, or political, and the account is banned. Banning a user from further participation in the method is the method that we use to further enforce the rules on the subreddit. These form the core content that we deliver as a community. There's also a secondary element to the community: courteous thank yous, discussions about potential implications of new information, and follow-up questions. This allows the discussion to be not just between the questioner and the asker, but between the whole community. Engagement of the community is a goal of public outreach as a whole. These experts I referenced earlier, all 400 plus of them had to follow these guidelines in providing at least 3 quality answers, which are reviewed and vetted by other experts and moderators. And when the application is accepted, and they are rewarded with a title near their name called a flair. For example, my flair marks me as being an expert in pornography and obscenity and the history of privacy. The flair is another kind of game layer built into our community. It's a visible reward system recognizing trusted user, encouraging their engagement with the community, and providing role models to the readers. This result is that our experts run the gamut from the self-taught to the MA student to professional archaeologists and linguists who are looking for a larger audience to engage with their work. And some of them are very well known in the field, and they keep coming back to Ask Historians to the tune of 600,000 subscribers. We'll have more of this on a later presentation, but needlessly to say, over the past several years, our project has become more successful than we ever really could have hoped. And part of that success is that we've inherited a concept from the culture of Reddit as a whole called an AMA, which is short for Ask Me Anything, where an expert can come to volunteer to answer questions from a large audience of people who are interested in their research. And if you're interested in jumpstarting your own AMA or outreach project, feel free to come to us, talk to us, and we can organize an AMA for you for your institution. Over the past few years, we've hosted AMAs with published experts such as James McPherson, the author of Battle Cry for Freedom, Alex Wallerstein, the creator of the Nuke Map and the author of Restricted Data, and Professor David Mendris at the University of Portsmouth. We've also been lucky to have AMAs with the organizations such as the Getty Museum and the National Air and Space Museum. And the final way in which we've tried to make history more accessible to the public and to engage in a larger context is through our Ask Historians podcast, which has been tremendously successful. The podcast, which is run by myself and two other moderators, Sean Kiskell and Andres Patera, they're a way for individual players or members or other historians to come and have an hour or an hour plus long to talk about their research, talk about what interests. Some of the most notable ones have included Margaret Harris, an interview with Dr. Jennifer Evans and Sarah Reed in early modern medicine, and a recent episode on Canadian identity by Jeff Keelan. The following presentations will touch on this point in further depth. I believe that Ask Historians is a key platform in what it means to be a public intellectual in the digital age. And I would happy to invite each and one of you to participate in Ask Historians, whether in the AMA or with the podcast, or whether coming and participating in the community itself and answering questions. And if you have any questions and you want to come be involved, come and talk to us after the panel. We'll be happy to help you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is David Bowser. He earned his PhD at UCal Irvine working on the cultural and environmental history of wheat, flour, and bread in modern Britain, and now is an adjunct at Santa Monica College, Laguna College of Art and Design, Chapman University, and sometimes UC Irvine. David will be exploring the early history of the subreddit, and from its founding to its so-called Eternal September, and how this shaped the later institutional development of the site.
Dave, thank you very much, Hunter. Thank you all for being here. And there we go. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the NCPH for facilitating this. And I want to say a big thank you to our mod team, especially Hunter, who is the beating heart of the Ask Historians mod team. I am going to put my water right here next to you because I will need it. So we'll move the computer then. All right. What I'd like to do is build on what Brian said with a sort of brief oral history and sort of a narrative of the first 6 to 12 months of the Ask Historians community from its founding in August of 2011 up until a key moment in May of 2012 when we were the victim of a massive sort of troll operation, and we really learned that like the internet is a thing where people can be very rude and disruptive. And then I want to sort of use that to show that what we've learned with Ask Historians is that to create a community like this and then to sustain it really requires institutionalization, which is really where we are now. All right. Arthur Waddell, the somewhat mysterious founder of the subreddit, in the very first post on Ask Historians in August of 2011, asked for flares. He opened the very first post by saying that the subreddit was for, quote, normal people to ask professional historians questions about the past. Anybody can help to answer a question, but the panel is a way to make it more obvious that you are a worthy source of information. You are qualified, he explained, if you, quote, possess a deep understanding of a specific subject area or a wide amount of understanding of a larger subject area. He did not include any really formal qualifications at the outset, so there's no requirement to have a degree or anything like that. But he did say that Flare users would be, quote, held to a higher standard, which he outlined in the following way. Whenever possible, cite sources. If you are caught making an obvious lie, your tag will be removed. But we will be fair about this, because people make mistakes. Just be honest, he said. Included in his earliest request for Flare users was myself. I was one of the original people who joined, like the 12th Flare that was there out of however many hundreds have been since then. We have 400 active now, right? Okay, so I remember when the subreddit was less than fewer than 100 subscribers. The specific rules at the outset are difficult to reconstruct. They've been edited many times since then, and at the beginning we were bad historians and we did not keep a record of what this looked like. So we can reconstruct them from about June of 2012, and we can then sort of see how the rules evolved. But from what I can gather and what I remember personally, the rules at the very beginning, Art's initial rules were simple. They were to be polite, to avoid jokes and memes and puns as like main answers, and to use sources whenever possible. But we should note that at the beginning, Art had a very really an ideological view of what a community like this should be. And his argument was that this community should police itself. That this is a community that would allow the upvotes and downvotes to do the work, that good answers would be rewarded with upvotes, bad answers would be sort of punished with downvotes. And in his view, that was all that was necessary. He really wanted and continued to advocate for a long time for a hands-off moderation policy. As an example, about 6 months in February of 2012, he gave an update on the rules and on moderating. At this point, he was the only moderator, so as the founder, he was by default the initial mod. By February of 2012, the sub had about 5,000 users. And he noted at this point that he was considering adding another moderator, someone to help him eliminate spam posts. There are a few kind of day-to-day functions that you have to do. But he wrote at that point that the only thing that you really do as a mod is update tags, players, and clear the spam filter. You almost never delete anything, he said. In my time here, I've only deleted one post and one comment, both obviously posted by bots. That is sort of online programs that will sort of perform an automated task, usually to sell something or drive traffic. In these early days of the subreddit, I think back to this period quite fondly as a kind of golden age, when it resembled a sort of seminar where there were not that many flared users, there's not that many questions each day. The community of active contributors was somewhere between 10 and 20, and we would tend to sit down and simply discuss whatever questions had been asked each day. And it would be 3 or 4, maybe 10 questions on a busy day. Nearly every question got some kind of answer. So, something like a seminar, maybe something also a bit like a review session in an undergraduate survey before a midterm, but with no limits on topic and no anxiety about what would be on the exam. This enabled the community to grow organically. And as Brian mentioned in his discussion a moment ago, Reddit has good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. I think we were very fortunate that when AskHistorians began, we were a good neighborhood. There were a lot of people there who cared about the historical profession, who cared about sharing information and knowledge, who cared about civility, and the community did police itself. And when you have 5,000 or even 10,000 or even up to maybe as many as 20,000 users, you can police yourself. You can sort of create norms and expectations and enforce them without a whole lot of formality. And the community grew organically at that point. And it began to, so one thing that it really showed us, I think, is that it filled a gap in quality, both for readers and for the people who contributed, and recognizing that there is often a kind of blurry distinction between these two. But what it showed us is that there are a lot of people on Reddit, on the internet broadly, that have questions about the past, that want more than to simply Google something or go to Wikipedia. They want experts. They want people who can cite academic literature. They want answers. And these people love this subreddit. I mean, they are the sort of engine behind this, right? It also showed us that there is a significant community of historically minded people, the range of people that Brian discussed, from kind of self-taught up through tenured professors who want to speak about history and who have big opinions and big things to say. And this subreddit really met that need. It brought these communities together, and it created, I think, really something special. It also began to grow and get attention because it was a place where people could come and ask a question like, why did elves not cross the Atlantic? Which, look up that answer. I will tell you now. Look that up. It is an amazing post. But people would take these long, well thought out answers that were written by experts, and they begin to share them. And this is where the role of Reddit as a social media site. Now, it's not a social media site in the way that Twitter or Facebook is. It is anonymous. But it relies on sharing. It relies on communities. And there are two what are called aggregator subreddits that do not produce their own content. Rather, they exist to take other things from elsewhere on Reddit and share that within their own sort of world. The two of these that matter most for us are Best Of and Depth Hub. Best Of is just that. I mean, it can be anything from like the sort of best jokes to the funniest comments to the craziest stories to whatever. Depth Hub is a subreddit that would gather discussions from all over this enormous website of any sort of in-depth conversation. So it would be, someone explaining the ins and outs of copyright law in, cassette tapes, to finance advice, to the finer points of phalanx warfare in ancient Greece. Both of these websites became sort of like Ask Historians drove a lot of Best Of and Depth Hub. There's a common complaint among readers of those two sites that Best Of is really just the best of Ask Historians, because Ask Historians produced such a high quality and quantity of answers that whatever was best on Ask Historians would find its way to Depth Hub. And what this meant is that starting about February and March of 2012, Ask Historians was routinely featured on multiple subreddits. A good answer on an Ask Historians question would get seen tens of thousands of times and shared across multiple subreddits. I don't know that we got too many things like Facebook shares at this time, but certainly within the Reddit world, we became a very popular subreddit. And we began to grow. We began to grow rapidly. There were, I recall one post by one of our early moderators named Eternal Carry, was about the history of pirates, and people loved it. And it brought something like 3,000 new subscribers to a subreddit that at that time had about 8,000. So we go from 8,000 to 3,000 almost overnight. Now, if you recall, we begin with this kind of golden age with a sort of atmosphere, a sort of culture of this subreddit. And you begin to add a lot of people to that. Are you guys familiar with the term Eternal September? So it's a term that has deep history in the lore of the internet. In the old days, you had these Usenet message boards, which had a relatively low level of traffic, a relatively stable membership, a relatively stable set of cultures and expectations and norms that the community itself could articulate and enforce. And if a new person came in and did things wrong, violated the norms, was rude, whatever, people could say, hey man, be cool, like this is how we do it here. And it wouldn't really be that much of a problem. By the 1990s though, companies like AOL were bringing the internet to many, many more people. Pardon me, I skipped one point there. The difference with these Usenet groups is that each September, a group of college students would arrive on campus, would get the internet for the first time, would discover Usenet groups. And so these message boards would suddenly have an influx of new people who don't know the rules all at once. So September would be a rough month. I'm told that it's very similar in the medical profession when the new medical students come in whatever month it is. And there are mistakes to be made. It takes a few months to sort of acculturate people and teach them how things are gonna work. And this would happen each September with these Usenet groups. But when you have AOL bringing the internet to the whole country, to the whole world, you get what is called the Eternal September, a constant flow and an accelerated flow of new users constantly showing up, drawn by the quality that was created by this initial community and by its culture of civility and academic rigor and concern for the community. These new members were very interested, they were very engaged, but they don't quite know the rules. So many of them want to answer questions themselves, they want to be engaged, they want to ask questions that they've maybe been sitting on for a long time, but that get asked every week. So it is with the growth of Ask Historians through these aggregator subreddits, and the growth is truly remarkable. Let me just give you guys a couple of numbers. We had 500 in September of 2011. By Christmas of that year, it's over 2,000. By March of that year, it's over 5,000. By May, it was 15,000. By August, it was 30,000. By Christmas of 2012, it was 64,000. So we were growing exponentially at that point. And this began to raise a series of issues. It began to the change of the subreddit began to outpace the ability of the culture to moderate itself through the use of upvotes and downvotes. And thus we would get ongoing debates among users, because this is a platform that really allows users to say what they think about the moderators. It gives the moderators the chance to try to respond to user concerns. We begin to see a series of questions, a series of issues that were raised at that time that continue to drive the sort of structure of the subreddit, we had to clarify, what is the nature of quality? What is a quality answer? Does it need to have sources? Is Wikipedia really a source? Can you simply Google things? What about all of these new users who come in and see this website and are like, this is awesome, I love history, I love answering questions, I will use Wikipedia to answer as many questions as I can. How do you deal with that, right? Are upvotes and downvotes good enough to deal with an issue like that? The tone and atmosphere of the community. Reddit has a well-deserved reputation for many vile people and communities. These people found us and began to want to take part, began to want to drive particular agendas. We were invaded more than once and are regularly by people from the Stormfront, the white supremacist website, who will actually show up in large numbers, will push particular agendas, will try to flood us with particular answers or questions. They will sort of ask very loaded questions. If you're going to do this, you have to outline a mechanism by which you are going to police the subreddit. If the subreddit can no longer police itself through its culture because of the constant influx of people, you need to create institutions to do that. The institutions that we've created to do that is really a much broader moderation team with a much more robust set of rules, very quick to eliminate posts, to ban people. Recall that the founder, 6 months in, could post and say, no, I don't bother deleting anything. Today, one of the jokes about AskHistorians is that the most common comment is deleted because things are removed so frequently for not being up to standards. The breaking point, I think the real crucial moment came in May of 2012. The subreddit at this point had about 20,000 people. It had 3 moderators, Art, Eternal Carry, and myself. And we knew that the subreddit was growing, was coming sort of into its own, was drawing attention. But we had not really decided at that point what we needed to do, how we needed to manage it, and we became the victim of a troll attack. There was a subreddit called Game of Trolls, which is hence, since then it's been essentially banned. But they thought it was really funny to disrupt people and be racist and do terrible things to communities. And one of them contacted us claiming to be the author of Bill Sloan, a World War II veteran who'd written some military history. And he said, I'd like to do an AMA. I'm writing this book. I want to come and talk to your community about military history. And as one of the 3 people who was directly responsible for this, we did not understand that this kind of thing was possible. It never occurred to us that someone might do this in order to just make racist jokes and make us look stupid. That is exactly what happened. This person came in, needless to say, they were not actually Bill Sloan. Yes. You could tell something was up because their initial answers were very weak, and we started to notice within a few minutes that their answers had been pulled from sort of Wikipedia and easy Google stuff. We weren't quite sure what to do. We had no institutional structure at this point, right? So this particular person began to make very questionable comments and then drifted into outright racist rants, and we simply had to shut it down. And it was at that point that there was a major outcry among the community. The readers were not happy with us, justifiably, and at that point we realized we had to create an institutional structure to moderate this, to actually maintain what we had made. And that institutional structure is what you see here now, with a long series of weekly features, with podcasts, with a moderation team that is 40 people now?
35.
Lots, with a lot of turnover, but one that we have really worked hard to maintain. And as we will hear from Will and Kate, it is one that I think continues to be at the forefront of public history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. Well, the next speaker is William, independent scholar of European weapons and armor of the early modern period and later Middle Ages. He's experienced in public history, both online and in person, doing interpretations as a reenactor. He will be talking about how AskHistorians works as a tool to introduce lay readers to the historical disciplines. So.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm William, and I'm from the internet. It used to be a lot funnier. Now it's just, oh, of course, you're from the internet. Of course. Where else would you be from? As Hunter mentioned, I'm an independent scholar of medieval European armor and weapons. An independent scholar means I'm an enthusiast and an amateur. Our Ask Historians has given me a chance to share what I know, but also given me an incentive to deepen my knowledge, to improve my methodologies, to really grow as a scholar. And I owe the community so much. And I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about, indirectly, how that came about and how that comes about. On our Ask Historians, I answer questions about swords and armor and knights and all that cool stuff you were really into when you were 9. Some of us just never grew out of it. When I'm not on the subreddit, I'm a more conventional living history volunteer. I do presentations about English soldiers and civilians during the era of the Wars of the Roses. And I also do presentations on early American mixology. Maybe next time I'll bring some rough punch to the panel and get a little bit more festive. As you can imagine, armor and weaponry is a niche subject that has a lot of appeal to a very specific subculture on the internet. Hence, my working title for this portion of the panel, Yelling at Nerds About Swords on the Internet. I'm going to use my own experience on the subreddit to illustrate a bigger point. How we engage people, where we are, those nerds, those enthusiasts, those lay historical students, really. How we engage them where they are, and expand on ideas, and introduce those same people to historical thinking and historical methodology. Meeting really in the middle between pop culture and pop history on the one hand, and academia on the other. I'm sure that the idea of meeting people where they are is not alien to anyone in this room. This is what public historians do. But the internet gives it all a little bit of a twist. We can be both less formal and a bit more academic than we can be in traditional in-person public history settings and presentations. This lets us get at questions from a different angle and also address a different sort of question. Davey and Brian already mentioned a bit about the demographics of Reddit and our own little corner of it. Our users are disproportionately white males in North America, Australia, or Europe in their later teens or 20s. A lot of them have a fairly casual interest in history. Like a lot of people, they experience historical events through movies, video games, and TV. Many of them have very little historical education at all. A certain minority are undergraduate students of history or have a history degree, but the majority of our readers, and these are subscribers to the site, not just casual readers that see us somewhere else, are people who have no real particular historical training or education. Since they are young men, young white men on the internet, they have a very specific background. They're gamers and geeks and movie buffs. And their interests reflect this. They're interested in war, more war, everyday life, interestingly enough, sex, and Hitler. There are so many questions about Hitler. In my own field, our user base means that a lot of people asking questions have never read anything academic on the subject. But I don't think that's unusual. So, show of hands, how many people have read Claude Blair's seminal work, European Armor 1066 to 1700? Okay, how many people here have played D&D, Baldur's Gate, Diablo, Skyrim, The Witcher, any game where your character wears armor or uses a sword? Okay, like I thought, there's this tremendous interest, this well of enthusiasm about the medieval past or the pseudo-medieval past, about this medieval warrior image. It's this iconic representation in their culture. But there is this great divide between access to academic resources and the general public. In my discipline, a lot of the even foundational works are long out of print. Claude Blair's book was published in 1958 and went through several printing runs, but now can only be found at better public libraries or for about $100 on Amazon. And a lot of the rest of it is in journal articles, in museum catalogs with very limited print runs, and online resources, while excellent, are often more visual than academic articles. So it's very easy to look at pictures of armor. It's a lot harder to read what scholars have said about armor. So what people do get about these topics, about my topic in particular, and I think military history as a whole, is the worst kind of pop history. It's decontextualized. It shows like the deadliest warrior, which is literally who would win in a fight, the TV show. Or it's, websites like super cool medieval battles. I just made that up. I mean, to illustrate the dearth of really good, popular resources on this topic, I can mention 2 YouTube channels on medieval armor and weapons or warfare that are worth a damn. And one of them is run by a friend of mine. The common thread between pop culture's treatment of armor and pop histories is that these sources take armor and weapons out of their historical context. Everything is about specs, killer tech, who would win in a fight. It's about swords or armor or guns in isolation, not about what they meant to the people who made and used them, or how they would be made, or the sort of society in which these battles took place, in which these artifacts, these elements of material culture were used. Even when people talk about technological history, they talk about it in terms of a tech tree. And this is really visible on Reddit, but I think it's sort of paradigmatic of how people understand technological history. If you've never played Sid Meier's Civilization games, the tech tree is the linear progression of technology from worse to better. It's very Whittish, to be academic. You start at the Stone Age, get bronze, you develop religion, which is another technology, and then you progress through the Iron Age, the Industrial Revolution, and then you get Alpha Centauri. But, and I think this is really a very common sort of background. When people look at my own subject, they see it as the progression from unarmored Saxon warriors in a shield wall to mail-clad Norman knights to plate-armored men-at-arms in the 15th century to, guns. And guns are the killer act that transforms warfare. That's how people think of it. And they don't think about the larger historical context. They don't think about the fact that all of those people were equipped in the way they were because not just because they didn't have anything better, but because of the entire society that they lived in. And yes, there were improvements in protection. Yes, technology gets better. But that's only part of the story. So when people ask questions, they take these assumptions with them. These questions aren't contextualized necessarily. They're not talking about medieval economics or metallurgy or the transformation of society in the early modern era. They're often thinking about swords in terms of min-maxing a soldier's combat effectiveness. To use a term from gaming, it means basically creating the best spec so that you can beat the boss sooner in the game. And it often involves equipping yourself rather well. They don't think about it in terms of all of the other reasons why a soldier might carry a particular sword or a particular weapon. Like, I'm in Anglo-Saxon England, and swords are expensive. Or I'm in late medieval England, and suddenly swords are much cheaper because of advances in metallurgy, and that affects how I equip myself. But this missing context is where we come in. When people answer questions on their subreddit, we encourage them to go in depth, to go a step further. This doesn't simply mean answering the question in every single iteration of its details. It means expanding on the question, adding back in the context that is missing. Someone might ask a question about why people stopped wearing armor and when. This has been a very popular topic over the past month. I am not sure why. These things come and go. It's the damnedest thing. I might start my answer summarizing how long the process took. Beginning in the 16th century, going into the 17th, and really it extends into the 18th century and beyond, because heavy cavalry wore armor even later. I might look at the development of bigger and better guns, which is the conventional linchpin of the story, and it's important, sure. But I'd also look at the decreasing price and increasing quality of gunpowder, and at the decreasing quality of the metal used in plate armor, which is one of the great paradoxes of early modern armor history. But I would need to go beyond this technological discussion. I would need to look at why these technologies developed and the infrastructure that grew up and the introduction of gunpowder manufacture in England in the 16th century and the blast furnace and cheaper metal and everything like that. I'd also need to look at the tactical revolutions that made firearms common on the battlefield, the growth of lighter cavalry as a cheaper alternative to knights. I might talk about the economics of equipping armies and the growth of mass-produced munition army. A real answer to the question includes the history of technology, military history, political history, economics, and war. It looks at this development not through an isolated technological lens, but through multiple perspectives that look at the web of connections between historical developments. Beyond that, sometimes really great answers can challenge the premise of the question, even while it answers that. And to illustrate this, I'm going to go beyond my own specialty. I mentioned before that our AskHistorians is a veritable repository of Hitlerological knowledge. There is nowhere else that you can learn so much about Hitler so quickly. Because people love asking about Hitler. And I think there's a reason for this. The way the story of World War II and the way that people talk about Hitler in popular consciousness is told. Hitler is the inversion of the great man of history. He's evil rather than good. He's often portrayed as crazy rather than brilliant, but he's still given a particular agency, a particular power that everyone else around him is denied, including all those regular Germans that supported him and implemented his murderous genocidal policies. He's seen as a critical figure of the 20th century, and people thus see his biography as the key to understanding all of this. So people will ask about his sleeping habits and his drug use, various personal topics about Hitler that I will not mention in this panel, and was Blondie a good girl? Was she a good partner? And I hope people find answers to all of these questions. I really do, because I believe in curiosity as a driver of the life of the mind. But a good answer does more than simply answer a question about Blondie. It goes beyond and asks, why does this matter? Can we answer these momentous questions of the 20th century about genocide and about whether humanity will evolve beyond its, develop beyond its baser impulses? Apparently not. By looking at the biography of a single man, can we see the origins of genocide in a person's idiosyncrasies? And the answer is no. That we need to look at the wider historical context. We need to give back agency to all those people, both the victims and the perpetrators of Nazi crimes. And our good answers, we have one particular user, actually one of our moderators, who's fantastic at this, of taking these kind of pop history, I almost said pop Hitler, and expanding on them and using them to talk about agency and how history happens. So really, we can use these questions, and this is an illustration, perhaps, that there are no stupid questions, to illustrate the fact that not everything in World War II is about Hitler. In fact, most things aren't. Speaking as someone who engages in historical education with the public, both online and in traditional living history settings. I find that people get a very different experience from online interactions. When I'm dressed in the armor of a 15th century English archer, and I'm very thankful we don't have an illustration up here of it, but just imagine me in the kind of puffy jack, the salad helmet, all of that. The context of that armor is me. My body is the context of that. And the reproduction armor, or in fact, a historical site, a historic house, is the physicality of it, the physical location, the physical object that engages people. But online we can be much more abstract. I would say that I can make abstract arguments that don't translate into speech. I can give long citation lists with books that you need to go to an academic library to go to. Because people on the internet love hearing about that. They really do. They want this information. And because it's a lot easier to read about it in print. We can afford to be wordier. So, because of this difference, by my experience, online education fulfills a rather different purpose than in-person traditional public history presentation. It caters less to the general public and more to the passionate beginner. That nerd who's interested in swords and all sorts of other stuff, who's interested in the subject but doesn't know where to start. I mean, it's a great chance to use that enthusiasm to kind of engage with those people. The beauty of this way of answering questions, of engaging with the historical process, and recontextualizing things, is that it all relates things back to something that the asker is interested in, the very topic they're asking about. I think it's of it as a kind of backdoor to historical thinking, starting off with the topics people are passionate about and encouraging them to see those things in their wider context. Abstract questions of historical methodology become a lot more important and a lot more interesting and have relevance to something that you're excited about. I should know this. I learned just about everything I know about history and the historical process, following my own interests and my own passions. I had to learn how to view sources critically if I wanted to study armor as depicted in 15th century manuscript illuminations. A lot of the time, the armor that manuscript miniaturists paint doesn't look like historical armor. You need to be able to spot, oh, that they're drawing it that way because that's Hector in the Aeneid, or in the Iliad. Not a contemporary then. I had to consider historiography so that I knew where popular misconceptions come from, like the glaive geese armor, the term plate mail, the idea of studded leather armor, and also, why armor historians. I also need to learn historiography to know why armor historians use the terms they do, not using terms like glaive geese armor and plate mail, or, studded leather armor not being a thing. And I really became interested in this broader world of the Middle Ages through my own passion for this very nerdy, very, teenage boy obsession that I had growing up. I became interested in medieval industry because I was interested in how armor was made. I became interested in medieval art history because I was looking at pictures of armor drawn by Memling and Durham. And so I hope my answers inspire people in the same way, to dig deeper, to search more widely, to make connections and draw out implications, because isn't that what all of us as historical educators hope to do?
Thank you, Will. Our final speaker is Kate Stevenson. She's a PhD student at Notre Dame, researching religious self-help literature of the 15th century. Kate will talk about the future of AskHistorians and how the site benefits historians as well as the public.
I'm just going to talk
You
loud.
loud?
The NCPH has asked us, as good Midwesterners, what it means to do history in the middle. One of the things that I hope has come across most strongly so far is that AskHistorians isn't just placing itself in some pre-existing middle, Whether deliberately or not, we've actually ended up creating our own. The most radical and liberating thing of all is that we're not the middle between academic historian teachers and proletariat students. Only 2 of us up here are practicing academics. Neither one of those is the one who's published a book. Neither one of those is the one who gets invited to give public lectures. And neither one of those is the one who's conducted the most thorough literature review of their subject and knows more about it than the rest of us. We say the only qualification for writing an Ask Historians answer is the ability to write a good answer. Thanks to our lack of concern for formal credentials and the culture of anonymity fostered by the Reddit platform, we've become the meeting place for different conceptions of history, rather than for different hierarchies of historians. But at the same time, we are tethered to academia. It's built into our standards. In-depth, comprehensive, supported by current academic research. That requires an awareness of what the current research is. That requires the time and insider knowledge of how you stay up to date with changes. And most importantly, it requires some way to access the journals, books, and ephemeral insider networks of knowledge that communicate current research. Academia doesn't just supply our material, it actually governs access to it. And we all know academia is not the democracy that Ask Historians seeks to be. So to finish up for today, I'm going to look at the implications for Ask Historians of our necessary binding to academic history. At a time, academia right now is very much in its own middle of a conflagration over contingent labor, grad student exploitation, seemingly infinite compartmentalization and specialization, and the sense that all of this is bad, coupled with an inability to do anything besides make it worse. How, in this environment, can Ask Historians continue to thrive? And what strategies can we share for other public and digital historians facing similar funding and staffing shortages in the face of this incredibly urgent moment in American history to bring historical consciousness, or bring historical knowledge to public consciousness? So first, I want to talk about what it actually means to do history outside of an academic or professional hierarchy. I consider recruiting our occasional commenters to participate more often and earn flair as a designated panelist or expert to be my personal sacred duty as a moderator. And over when I'm trying to get people, I hear, but I'm just amateur, or I was dropped in the middle of the Caribbean by a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by Providence and Pollard. I will never be a scholar. I hear, I just read a lot. Yes, I just read a lot. That is the entire point. That is what I want. So one of our challenges, and my challenge especially as an academic and a mythical girl on the internet, is to mediate the academicness of my own language to make us seem less ivory tower, but at the same time without belittling either them or me as a woman intellectual. The other mods and I have to appeal to potential flares on 2 competing grounds. First, that they do possess the ability to absorb and reproduce an academic insider perspective. And secondly, the confidence that an outsider perspective is something unique, valuable, and necessary in and of itself. So the benefits of celebrating an outsider perspective already is one of the most important takeaways from the Ask Historians as a project. We're so much more used to celebrating an inside perspective, either academics talking to other academics, or local historians evoking pride in the towns and cities for the citizens of our own. But ultimately, all historians are teachers. We empower people to know. What Ask Historians tries to move beyond and nurture is the power to pass that knowledge on, especially outside formal settings. Our conversion rate of potential recruits into certified flares proves the viability of our strategy. Participating in this shift of public historical goals from the unidirectional conveying of knowledge to the creation of communities of historians is one of the most exciting things for me personally to watch about Ask Historians. Our challenge from the other direction is different. I am currently one of the Ask Historians academics, although I don't expect that to last past graduation. Like I tell people, my job is writing about history. My hobby is writing about history anonymously on the internet. I have made my decision to spend literally thousands of hours convincing myself that this is fun, and I have arranged my life accordingly around this. But that kind of practice is not long-term and wide-scale sustainable if AskHistorians wants to grow. One example from the academic war zone must suffice to explain the problem. Recent research has shown us the systemic factors stacked against women succeeding in academia. Moms use maternity leave to be parents. Dads use paternity leave to write a book and get tenure. Women carry a vastly disproportionate amount of the departmental service burden, extra responsibilities that are not their research. Overall, factors like these make women significantly less likely to have viable long-term academic careers, and it means the ones who do have less time outside their work lives. This dynamic plays out every day on AskHistorians. We are on Reddit, a website that the Medieval Feminist Scholarship Society uses as shorthand for internet misogyny. That was a good moment for me. AskHistorians, as we mentioned, has a reputation both on and off Reddit for strict standards of civility and zero tolerance for bigotry, including sexism. Answers on feminist historiography and women's history have been voted by users the best post of the month 4 times now in less than 3 years of running monthly awards. And yet, our readership still can't seem to break the Reddit average score of about 15% female users. And our team of flares is actually even worse. We have an even lower percentage of women. Average. On a website with large sections of itself devoted to promoting no means yes. AskHistorians is passively accepting of women. So how do we go from a passive strategy that fosters a nice environment for mostly men to an active strategy that encourages women's participation to make an even better overall subreddit for everybody? Now, I want to argue that increasing incentives for participation by drawing on AskHistorians' roots in and out of academia can help address this imbalance and make us a better public history platform. By working towards mutually reinforcing goals of publicity, legitimacy, and advocacy, we can incentivize participation by academic and independent historians on both a personal and professional level. More importantly, our strategies have the potential to be adapted for other public history platforms and situations. As we go forward into a world with fewer and fewer academic research positions, more trained PhDs, and less money for public projects and salaries, our experiments, failures, and successes can help us found a viable, independent historical profession, hobby, and community. The biggest incentive for AskHistorians panelists answering questions is the audience. I love my research, and I'm spending years on my freaking dissertation, okay? Who's gonna read it? My advisor, my mother, my best friend, maybe the rest of my committee if I'm lucky. I write something on AskHistorians in 3 or 4 hours, and maybe 4,000 people are gonna read it that first day alone. We can work to increase this number of readers for our popular posts and to bring our less popular posts in line with it. On a bare material level, of course, we will recruit new readers as well as new answering panelists, most basically if more people know about us. We promote on Facebook and Twitter like a lot of other people, but we have a unique problem. Social media, each new iteration of social media seems to favor shorter and shorter engagement, wittier, snappier, shorter. Our entire reason for being is long-form writing and long-form in-depth thought. So with our Facebook page, one of the things that we're trying to work out right now is how to balance more sensationalizing headlines that will draw people, get people to click through to our page, with some sort of underlying sobriety that points to what is actually behind the link. No, we don't want teachers to quote unquote hate us. Teachers, we want you to love us. We want you to use our answers to help improve your curriculums beyond the textbook. But there's a difference between asking, how did 19th century theologians interpret the story of Jonah and set this in the context of contemporary biblical criticism, and hey, did people ever experiment to see whether a person could live 3 days inside a whale? We at AskHistorians need to be better than our readers. We need to use this unique type of enthusiasm and insight into like what's actually interesting about history, and their way of forging a personal connection with history as a template for our own efforts at promotion in slightly more scholarly terms. But as we all here know, this idea of exposure is really just working for free, which is a scam. If we want to make AskHistorians viable for overworked historians in and out of academia, we need to make it a legitimate crossover activity between hobby and profession. I'll mention two potential strategies here that don't involve one of us up here winning the lottery and giving people handouts, which would be awesome. If you've won the lottery, come talk to me afterwards. First, we can use AskHistorians as a springboard for individual involvement in other public and paid activities. Second, we can treat Reddit as an albatross in the fullest sense of the metaphor. Now, we know that a lot of people in and out of academia want to do public history or popular history. We're teachers and lovers of the past, and we want everybody to love it just as much as we do. So let's make AskHistorians a platform to build that sort of presence or strand as part of a broader career. When authors use AskHistorians to promote their new books in an AMA, we market those events as hosted by AskHistorians in addition to promoting the author. One of our users has used his posts as the kernel for articles in The Atlantic and The Nation. We have people who've taken their lessons from learning and running a podcast and run their own. I recently landed a paid writing job for an online history magazine, and my portfolio was entirely AskHistorians answers. The quality of work being produced on our subreddit is often astronomical. We need to get over our own anonymous user accounts and claim our work as our own and claim its source. When we add AskHistorians to our online resumes in forums that professional historians see, but outside of a job search context, it makes AskHistorians more viable as a line on a CV for that future job search. The other hurdle with legitimacy in the professional historical world is, of course, Reddit. Reddit used to be known for cat gifts and militant atheism. Now it's known for misogyny and white supremacy. We can promote Reddit to professional historians, especially young academic ones, as our chance to make a real and concrete difference. We really are the place to head off future recruits to Holocaust denialism and white nationalist crusader apologetics. AskHistorians can make itself known as the place to both fight those battles and to get incredibly valuable currency of professional acknowledgement for fighting those battles instead of just academics talking to other academics. This bleeds into our final sphere of strategic engagement, activism. We mentioned that the politics of AskHistorians has always been the politics of doing history responsibly. We have a 20-year moratorium on discussing current events, or at least we did. Recently, the moderation team chose to take a public stand against the destruction of the NEH and the NEA. I don't think in this company I have to explain why this is the hill that we would choose to die on. The really interesting thing is, like, we did get some pushback from some of our users who said we shouldn't be involved in politics at all. But as a subreddit, as a website, we also got publicity beyond Reddit for taking this stance. This kernel of a broader public platform, we can use that going forward, mobilize in ways that will help us and similar efforts to what we do gain an even bigger role in the conversation about public history and simply in doing public history. In particular, we should barge our way into the grunt work of shaping what digital humanities is going to look like in the future. It's really just heartening for me to watch online efforts replicate the academic popular history divisions. Online courses and TED Talks are one-sided, reinforcing the magisterial nature of a single authoritative story. Sensationalist podcasts are fun, and they're 50,000 times more accessible than the responsible academic work that tells you what actually happened. Even really cool projects like the one that is recruiting people to transcribe manuscripts to help us understand Shakespeare better requires, if you've ever tried to participate, it requires paleographical and language training that you pretty much need to be an academic to get. So, in the middle of the kaleidoscope of histories and ways of doing history, Ask Historians is uniquely posed to see that the inevitable replication of the divide in the digital humanities as well is actually not inevitable. We are in the middle, and we must be a voice for a unified digital historical world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That was the last of our panelists.
While we're waiting, does anyone have questions? We should like make you guys stare at the blank screen.
We'll come back to this in a second. Let's go into the questions. So we want to open the floor here for questions and answers. So,
Grace, Letter, you were first, and then Plaid Shirt was second.
Oh, I have a question. So I think it was Will that said that the majority of the subscribers are young white men who are asking all the questions. So how do you guys branch out to attract other types of people that are not young white men? Do you yourselves post questions that might broaden the interest? I mean, how does that work?
We do a lot of the moderators post questions. We also, if we see somebody answering a question roughly in that area, we might, arrange to have questions posted. I personally participate in some of the other more women-heavy subs on other like small communities on Reddit, and one of our other moderators who specializes is a woman who specializes in fashion history does as well, and so we sometimes promote our work on those the other subreddits, or if we write really cool women's history questions, they get linked by them, and then we get more users that way.
We also
and the other thing that we do that I at least try to do is turn questions that don't seem originally to be about women into discussions of that. We get a lot of sex questions, and that is a chance to write about women, and to write about women often from a feminist perspective, which is really lacking when people are asking, but really, what were hoplites like? But really, Athens? But really, Sparta? Really, Sparta?
I think another thing that we do is we have one thing that we explicitly did to address this was we have theme weeks. A lot of discussion around it was where basically there's a theme of the week. And I think our first one was women's history. Might have been our first, or it was very high up there. And the idea behind these is that we encourage people to ask questions about a certain thing that often doesn't get asked about. There is never, or there's been like 3 military history related theme weeks, and there's a reason for that. And that's because those questions get answered anyway. I think when we try to recruit AMAs, we also look to include a wide variety of historical perspectives.
We actually, one of the things that we've tended to use AMAs more is to talk about history of race and history beyond white Europeans. I think the AMAs have been more successful at that than in women's history. Part of this is because Reddit does have a really, really bad reputation among women's historians.
And I mean, one challenge that we've had with the history of race is that we get a lot of questions about slavery. There's very few, and the civil rights movement, and that reflects, the way that high school students are taught about the history of race in America and racism in America. We don't get as many questions about jazz or Negro League baseball or this whole depth of, the African American experience or Mexican American experience. So I think that's something that we try to, kind of tilt the deck as much as we can.
So, my name is Owen Rogers from the Library of Congress Veterans History Project.
Yes. That was a great anime.
We've done 2 AMAs. And every now and then, someone will anonymously post content. One of the library's shared tools is a shared Reddit. And so every now and then we just wind up serendipitously on Ask Historians. I was going to ask for if you had any tools, tips, best practices for pumping and priming the system in anticipation of getting more user feedback. I think our 2 posts, one had 40 comments, the other had 60. And I was wondering, I don't know, is there a strategy to going viral?
We
or is
prepared
it
a
just-
guide recently on like
Okay.
how to have better AMA. We list like the times to post. I believe Mondays are highest traffic day.
Right.
Around the afternoon is a great time to post. Another thing we do is look at some of the other subreddits like in related, like there's a librarian subreddit,
Yeah.
and then you try cross-posting there. It's good to be involved in the community as well, but it's also, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's good to think of like clickbaity titles.
Right.
Right, which we have helped people who've done AMA in the past like brainstorm.
That's great. And so would it just be should I contact you based on your sort of forum contact info, or is there like
we have a specific email.
Awesome.
It's AskHistoriansAMA@gmail.com, and that's where we organize all of our AMA data.
awesome?
And anybody that wants to, is interested in doing that, feel free to talk to me afterwards and take down your information.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Question?
Yeah, have you had any issues with Ask Historians being used as like a place for students to mine answers to their work? Have you had any issues with plagiarism and copyright?
Yeah.
Hunter should take that question.
So we have, it's always a concern, and we have a rule about homework. And our homework rule is if you ask a question and you state that it's homework, we're going to remove it, and we're going to tell you to rephrase your question, being clear that it is homework, but not asking us to do it, but instead help you understand what you're missing. So if you're really stuck on something, tell us what you're stuck on, and we're going to help you help yourself. We are quite certain that users come here and they ask questions and they don't tell us, and they're going to use it on the paper. We know this because we have been contacted multiple times by professors who caught their students plagiarizing. And they messaged us. Was it?
Did we get a flare about
Yes, we've people have found the subreddit because their teachers, their professors, their student plagiarized it. They Google it because all this is archived on Google, and it's really easy to find. And they then start contributing to our site because that's how they found it. So this is a line from us at least, but if you're plagiarizing off of an internet site, it's really not that smart because it's gonna get
So sure the first.
it's a concern, and anyone who's dishonest about it and doesn't tell us, in the end they're hurting themselves, and we can't stop you if you just are not going to let us know. Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot for a great panel. I bet you could present pretty much the same thing at any number of history conferences and have a lot of what you talked about expertise and mediation and power and shared authority and meeting people where they are in the room of public historians that we really get that. So the other side of that question about how we as public historians and public history educators can use the Reddit to introduce people to what public history is and what it does using those things. So I don't know if anyone we've all probably heard about how people might use Wikipedia as an exercise about how content's created, but if anyone's used the Reddit to talk about some of those issues with students or community partners.
So are you asking like have teachers ever contacted us to say like, hey, can I have students answer questions as part of the project?
Yeah, we just brought you in to talk about.
Actually, yeah,
you want to go?
This was over a year ago is when we did this. We had a teacher contact us, I believe it was high school history class, and she wanted to basically use a subreddit to like show how history is done.
Right.
So she contacted us, and she wanted to have basically a special AMA, which was all questions from her students, and so the students, they worked together to create a dozen, maybe 20 questions, all of which were posted in one AMA thread. And we worked to get a couple of our Flare users all combined to give answers to those questions. So it helped the students understand how to ask a good question. And it was group collaborative effort on their part to try and figure out what the best angle was. And then we made sure that players didn't just answer, but also talk about the process of answering. So it was to help introduce them to the historical disciplines, and it was actually one of the most popular AMAs we had in the Flare side. Because we'll have panel AMAs, but this was one that they definitely got very much into. And I think we did one other like that later on, and we'll talk about that.
We had someone contacted us really recently, and they said they wanted us to ask the questions and have their students answer them.
Yes, that's the one. But yeah, we haven't.
But we didn't
talked
hear
to them
the
about that, but we haven't run
We
it.
didn't hear back from them, like kind
But yeah,
of.
so we have to have to use this what's in our questions.
And then the other thing that we didn't mention was every Monday we run a feature called Monday Methods. And this used to be run by one of our African historians who actually is not an academic and is currently run by our wonderful Holocaust expert. And we'll pick a different topic like how to do what is disability theory in history, or obviously close to my heart, what's the difference between feminist history and women's history, and or even just stuff like we've had to debunk this cultural Marxism, which is now a buzzword for everything that I guess isn't white nationalism. But really something that throw out a topic, and maybe there'll be a long explanation, or maybe people can just provide insight into, hey, here's how I deal with this issue in my own work as a historian, and that can be really useful for especially people who are early in an academic career, and by which I even mean academic career, I mean undergraduates who nobody ever teaches you how to come up with a thesis for a paper. That's probably the most common question I answer, is somebody saying, I have to write a paper and I don't know how to make an argument.
Who do you think about?
It's kind of related to a couple other questions. How much do you have any control over like audience access to like a certain question? So kind of related to that, you had that teacher come, she wanted just her class they would ask. Like you kind of, it sounds like you kind of set it up so that they had these 20 questions going. It was a very specific AMA, but could have any user dropped in there and just been started doing dropping bombs or whatever?
Open up something so
cigarettes
we can show.
A lot of comments.
Yeah, the Herman Gordon one, that one's filled with things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can remove comments.
Right. I mean, nothing actually I had like going on here.
Yeah,
nothing makes me happier when I see.
You're seeing what
like,
everyone else
it does
is. All those red, that's what
that makes
gets
me feel
removed.
like it's being curated.
Yep.
And when a thread gets really popular, this can happen.
Labor intensive. It's a lot of work.
Some of these are people making jokes. Some of them are people who copy pasted off Wikipedia. Some of them they're just dropping a link to some sketchy site. There's probably at least one or two Nazi apologists in there, since it's a Herman Goring thread. Yeah, we can control things, and when it's an AMA, generally we're controlling for who can answer. So if we brought a guest panelist to an AMA, only they're going to be able to answer questions, and anyone else, even if it's a good answer, we're going to remove it. If it's a good answer, we'll send them a private message to like, we're really sorry, we'll keep contributing, but this is exclusive. So whereas in that one, where we're only questions from the students, I believe we did not allow any other questions to be posted because we didn't want it to be detracting from their experience.
Oh, so you actually could turn off like that function?
Yeah. So we have control over what gets posted. We can remove pretty much anything that gets posted if we feel that it goes against the spirit of the subreddit. Did you do something to add, Will, or just I believe you're in it.
Do you know if anyone has used this as a teaching tool for online classes?
Someone who actually teaches David.
I have tried. I've tried to use various things on Reddit as teaching tools. I don't teach online, but I teach a lot, and I use online components a lot because I have a lot of experience with this. I have not quite found a formula that works. There's a sort of rule on the internet. I don't know if this is true or not, but the idea is that 90% of internet content is done by like 1% of people, right? And so, we look at a thread on here that might get 100 upvotes. We know that means that we're getting, thousands of viewers because most people are not engaging at all, never mind answering. And so I've tried to do things where I have students, ask questions. I created my own private subreddit once upon a time for only my students. And it's, so there's legal issues because it's a third-party site and you're, sort of having students come and patronize the site. But you can protect against that fairly well. Reddit protects privacy. It doesn't require anything from you. So you can sort of get around that. But you then end up with the theoretical idea of a kind of Ask Historians community, but it's very hard to replicate that in practice because a lot of students are hesitant to sort of post publicly. It's the same issues I'm sure you'd find with any other
message board. I had hoped that the upvote and downvote mechanisms, things like that, would really help in a classroom situation, but I haven't found a way to make it work. So I would say that it's no better or worse than whatever kind of message board you might use on Canvas or Blackboard or other sort of online platforms.
I hope this makes sense. My question is sort of about emotional labor, maybe connecting it to people who would possibly not be moms. Like if you're someone out in the African American or what have you, and you're talking about issues with this and this and that, but you have problems possibly including people who would have to like see some of these comments that you showed and you end up deleting that the public doesn't see, but the mom can see, and like something else like that needs to deal with that.
Well, we can all talk about burnout because this is, as you can see, it's a really intensive job. But the specific question of emotional labor, yeah, is a factor. I talk about sex on Reddit, which means most of the time what I'm actually talking about is sexual violence, and especially we recently lost our most prominent history of slavery contributor. Since I crossed over into early modern, I'm trying to step up and take over for some of that. And then I don't mean that this is even compares to the people who write about the Holocaust, quite frankly. Because I write about slavery once a month, and they write about the Holocaust every day in terms of time. And so there are times, when I sometimes will write an answer or I'll moderate at the gym, so I'm actually physically doing something else at the same time, and that can help. And sometimes you just have to shut the computer screen and walk away. But one of the things we have a really flexible agreement among the moderators in terms of how much time it can take. So some of us spend all of one day or all of a week basically constantly and then are gone for a month. And there's no...
This is kind of related to the first question that we had about what the audience of readers for the site is rather than moderators or players. And I was curious if you had any suggestions for I would imagine that a first hurdle is like how to use Reddit at all.
Yes. We had an AMA with Dr. McPherson, and he's probably 80s at least, and he doesn't computer well. So we had one of the moderators was emailing him the questions that got posted. He would then write the answer, email it back to her, and then she would post the answer on his behalf. So we definitely had to help with baby steps. That was really early on, and since then we have a very in-depth guide for doing AMAs. So you can bring guests on to do them. We can hold their hand the entire way through. And we've had some they needed a lot of handling. But when it comes to just regular users, it's definitely something that we need to work on and teach people how to get acclimated to the Reddit environment. And who started using Reddit the most recently? I don't remember that hurdle, so I don't know if you have anything to contribute insightful.
Well, and I imagine there's a YouTube tutorial somewhere that's
it's straightforward for the most part. As you can see, it's just like this. You make your account, email, password. You don't even have to use an email. You make a username, a password, email for password retrieval, and then simple as submit, ask a question. And then it's got a box where you type in the question. You type in the question, and then it runs through us, the moderator, to make sure it doesn't go by any of the rules. And then it's approved.
For Reddit in general, though, the first thing I tell anyone that's going to get on Reddit is unsubscribe from all the subreddits that you are automatically subscribed to.
Yes.
Most of them are inane. Some of them are occasionally offensive. The really bad stuff are not default subreddits, but bad stuff gets on relatively regularly.
Yeah, I mean, there's...
Can you show them what a front page looks like and explain what a default is, even though that's not going to matter. So when you join Reddit, you have on the when you go to reddit.com, you have a list of things, and all of these are going to be from a different subreddit. Where it's can you zoom in? You still have that power. So you can see this one is from our technology. This is from our science. Okay, this is obviously not my own front page because that would be
I was all.
Oh, this is all okay.
This is not what I'm subscribed to. Don't
So one of the things is that you will automatically be subscribed to, which means that subscribe means that posts from this subset will appear on your own personal and customized front page, and this includes things like awe, which is cute animal pictures, and gaming, which is people's screenshots of their video games. It really sucks. So go there. But it's a very important place. But yeah, so that's what we mean by a default subreddit, and that's what we mean by subscribe. It's just you can go to a custom page that links things that you might be interested in.
The Reddit experience is basically what you make it. What you are subscribed to is going to very much dictate what you're seeing. So we subscribe to a lot of history-based on Reddit. My wife, she subscribes pretty much just to fashion. So what I see on Reddit and what she sees on Reddit is very different. And then someone who wants to see stuff that we don't want to see, their Reddit experience is going to be something that many people in this room probably would not enjoy. So you have a lot of control over it. But for new users, when you're first confronted with Reddit, it can be strange. And it definitely is something that we have to work on teaching people about. So.
Yeah. I was just thinking sort of if you were to use it in a classroom context or in the interest of expanding.
So we have time for one more question, and then we're going to revisit the tabs here.
Go ahead. That's all right. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna ask, what do you guys consider to be like good sources? Because I know you're trying to answer them like quickly, and then like I'm sure like with Elfin travels, like it requires like a lot of.
It can depend a lot. I mean, some questions are going to dictate what sources you use.
Is it mostly primary?
We really try to get people to use good academic
Secondary sources.
Okay.
Something from a reliable press, something that we can verify. So in Google Books is invaluable from our perspective.
Right.
If someone says something, I haven't verified it probably, but I can open up that book, I can search, I can find, I can usually see the footnotes. So we can verify those things. So we want sources that we can verify. That's what it is. Okay, so we'll want to see if we can get those tabs to show. So these are the questions that we asked. Here is Hamilton, TRB 1783, has kindly offered his thoughts on how to utilize Hamilton's deep public history. I want to scroll down a little further.
Show them the upload and the post to like how to explain how it's
Okay. Yeah, so okay, so as you see, for the question itself, you can upload the question, and this affects the score here. He has 12 points, having posted it 49 minutes ago, which is pretty decent. And then at the top, this is the upvotes of the question itself. So that kind of represents.
So when you guys all go to Ask Historians and read, you're going to answer every good answer with an upvote.
Yeah. And then so the top one, that's kind of indicative of people browsing the front page of Ask Historians and going, hey, that sounds like an interesting question. Then the one on question on the answer itself, that is indicative of people who actually read it and found it to be insightful. The way Reddit works, those numbers are not always exactly showing how many people actually read it though, because I believe they think like their numbers show that 1 in 10 readers actually going to upvote something. So if you do something that has 12 upvotes, that's probably 100 people who read it. If you have 100, that's probably 1,000. And it keeps going like that. And something that hits the front page, it'll have 1,000, 2,000 upvotes.
Well into
that could be 50,000 readers, even more, because Reddit once you get to the top of Reddit and it's showing on sites, there's hundreds of thousands of people who are not subscribed. And they're just browsing because they're interest learners. So they see these, they read them, but they don't necessarily upload, they don't necessarily contribute, they just want to read. So let's go to the next one.
I mean, that's where the problem of moderation comes in, right? Because like when you have a really good post, so the upvotes on the original question will move it up or down on the Ask Historians page itself. If it gets high enough and it sort of has enough traffic, it'll make its way onto the sort of all page, the very front page of the whole site.
What we went to briefly to show you Reddit
right.
as a whole.
And then so that can end up being, someone will have like whatever, like random subreddits, and then we'll just be right there mixed in. They won't even realize it's Ask Historians. They'll show up. Sometimes they'll contribute. Sometimes, like you can tell when something really hits all because suddenly 1,000 people are showing up and they all want to share like a GIF or like crack jokes,
So
like screw around.
It's the
and
balance. It's the balance of having a lot of exposure for these answers, which we love, and it's great to get people to learn new things. But it also is bringing in people who, as David talked about, it's September for them, and we have to keep teaching 1,000 people every day. So okay, so
kind of hit our time.
yeah, okay, so let's see. This one was answered. Let's just.
I hope you guys were all
that one. That one was
So
answered.
you can kind of see the questions
That
that
was
we
answered.
started at the beginning. You can hopefully take a look at them.
Everything was answered. Okay, we succeeded.
You've been listening to the Ask Historians podcast. For more history like this, visit us at reddit.com/r/askhistorians and ask over 100 historians and enthusiasts anything you want to know in history. Find us on Twitter as @AskHistorians and subscribe to the show on iTunes. Or visit askhistorians.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and join us next time on the Ask Historians podcast.